Good afternoon and welcome to Empowering Voices. This is your tech facilitated GBV and legal empowerment in the digital age webinar. My name is Habiba Osman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Human Rights Commission, and I'm honored to moderate today's discussion. This webinar is taking place during 16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence, and it does mark a significant milestone as we launch the EmpowerLine's innovative mobile app. So I am excited about that. It has been developed by the Gender Justice Unit with support from Irene Staehelin Foundation. But before we begin our panel discussion, I would like to share some few housekeeping notes. One of the things that would like our audience to do is to please use the Q&A function for your questions. The chat is available for comments and engagement. And this session is also being recorded. Technical support is also available via a private chat. So welcome. And just to add as well that as a Chief Executive Officer, I'm also the Oversight Committee member for the Gender Justice Unit. Our first performance this afternoon is a poetry performance. And to set the tone for our discussion, we begin with a special performance by Miss Upile Chisala, who is an acclaimed Malawian poet, storyteller, and educator, now based in Maryland, the US. And beginning her journey by sharing poetry on social media, she has also published 3 celebrated columns and edited the groundbreaking anthology, Woven with Brown Thread. As education lead at Poeto, she addresses the digital divide while promoting AI implementation. And she's also been named in Forbes Africa 30 under 30 list. Upile brings unique insights into the intersection of technology, creativity, and social impact. Upile, it is a pleasure to welcome you. And in her own words with us, thank you for joining the panel. And we do hope that our audience can also enjoy this performance. Upile, over to you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And also thank you all for inviting me here. I feel so proud of all the work that GJU is doing, and I'm excited to be a part of this to celebrate this amazing accomplishment. So I know I only have a little brief period of time, so I'll be reading a few poems from my book, A Fire Like You. And so here we go. Swim class. You cannot dive into their mouths and fish out a sorry. It's never worked that way. And what good is a sorry you had to drown for? You are not a mender of men. I want to break the Messiah in you. Not everyone is yours to save. Fortunately, I write really short poems, so we'll be done quickly. This poem is called Grace. You've got to make right with your story. None of this half-living and hot anger. None of this leaving yourself and falling into people. None of this staying because their warmth comes with little work. None of this settling for smallness. You've got to make right with your story so you can be a home to yourself, because no one can give you as good a life as you can. Ready. Now that you've chosen peace, prepare for it. Make yourself a home for the healing. Half of the work is ready in your heart. So when joy walks in, you know it's yours and that you deserve it. And then I have 3 more poems for you. This poem has no name. Expect love. and change and growth and failure and goodness and all the other symptoms of a life lived to its fullest. My last two poems. This poem is called There Isn't a Fire Around Like You, and it has a really beautiful illustration. Oh, you can't see it, sorry. There's a beautiful illustration. This book was a collaboration with two other women poets. And I often find that's what I enjoy the most about my work is the opportunity to collaborate with other African women to make. So this poem is called There Isn't a Fire Around Like You. Because you have it, time, and having it is a blessing. Spend some of it learning how not to be afraid of yourself. And the last poem I thought I should read that came to me, just in the spirit of the work that is being done here and the practice of telling, of saying, of standing up for yourself, of breaking some of these generational curses and using this app to make a difference within your own lives and the lives of your community and the people you care for. This poem is called Window, and it would be my last poem. In my mother's living room, I sit in grief, and she stirs so much you'd think she's dancing. She's not used to seeing the insides out. In me, she is seeing a sadness she keeps quiet in herself. Imagine that, never having the privilege to listen to your pain. Imagine that, never knowing you have the right to fall apart. How many women's stories go untold? How many parts of our mothers have never seen the light? Open the window. Let them see the light. Let those stories be told. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Upile, for the powerful opening. I believe that this sets the tone of the stories that we would like to tell. And going into our main presentations today, we have several speakers, but let me take the opportunity now to welcome Justice Zione Veronica Ntaba, who is a High Court judge of Malawi serving at the Zomba Registry in the southern part of Malawi. Her remarkable journey includes working as a first director of legal affairs at the Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority. And her expertise spans energy, law, human rights, and constitutional law. And Justice Ntaba is passionate about gender issues, children's rights, and climate justice. Her dedication also extends beyond the bench through her work with various NGOs and as a former World Vision ambassador on ending child marriages in Malawi. Justice Ntaba, welcome to this panel discussion. I would also want you to share a bit more from your judicial perspective. What are the key challenges in prosecuting tech-facilitated GBV cases? And how do current legal frameworks address these challenges, in your opinion? And you do have 7 minutes, my lady. Thank you.
Ooh. Before I start my conversation with you, I've started liking this this quote from Demi Lovato, who sings because she's a survivor or a victim of technology facilitated violence. She said, "Sitting behind a computer gives people a sense of anonymity, but everyone needs to realize that words, even the ones they write online, have a strong power to hurt." And going to the question that you've asked about, what are the key challenges that the judiciary are currently facing in terms of either prosecuting or actually judging this particular kind of cases, you will find that there's a lack of awareness and training. And there's a big lack of awareness of what the laws are. Not a lot of people still know that there's a Data Protection Act, which protects people's privacy and the data that is collected by from them in terms of whether it's from companies or whether it's from our search phone providers or that information from our banks, all those particular parameters. So that lack of legal awareness is very critical, and it's also impacting the kind of cases or the prosecution of cases and the enforcement and implementation of this law. Also, people don't realize that we have what we call a E-Transactions Act. And so that inability for a prosecutor to bring the right charge for such offense, for an offense that has been committed within that particular law, is also affects it. The fact that we also have a Cybercrime Act. So the fact these issues of not having legal awareness and no training of law enforcement officers, including judicial officers, is affecting the way cases that are coming, cyber crimes or technologically facilitated violence cases are done, or online violence cases are taken on board. The second issue is, and I'm glad to see that there's Mark right here, the digital evidence, and the police are here, the digital evidence collection. I think collecting and presenting digital evidence in court can be challenging, especially when you have people that are not well trained to do so, whether it's a prosecutor, a magistrate, or any law enforcement officer. So you do find that digital evidence collection itself has an impact because, as you know, we cannot make decisions if the evidence is not sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person committed this crime, whether it was cyberbullying, online harassment, all those particular parameters. So we do realize that you need specialized skills and tools, and so investigators need to be able to do all these things, because ultimately, whatever comes in, if it's weak, it means we will not have a good decision for a person who has been a victim of cyberbullying. The third issue,
Wonderful.
Yeah. Sure.
My lady, before you continue, because I know that, yes, I asked a broad question, but I wanted you to also zero in. I wanted you to also zero in on how can the legal empowerment tools that some you've mentioned support the judicial process, particularly also when you think about the policy reforms that are needed to better address digital violence.
Okay, so for instance, if you do know the Cybercrimes Act itself, your ability to understand that when something happens to you that you report it. So the minute it happens, you report it. So you realize you can report an offense to the police. You can also report it to Marker through SET, or you can even report it to the platform that you use, whether it was Facebook, Instagram, all those particular parameters. You will find that there are areas where you can report it. So having that legal knowledge to understand that this is a violation. So I was just asked also to talk about what tech-facilitated gender-based violence or tech-facilitated violence is. So for instance, you could have what we call cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is somebody harassing you, intimidating you, doing threats online that are targeted at you as a woman. So you do find that a lot of women face this, where women are targeted and they're called all sorts of names, including myself. I've been called the H word, the hula word, which is so common in terms of our country when you want to insult a woman online on Facebook. So that's the harassment, the threats, and the intimidation, that's cyberbullying. Then we also have what we call non-consensual sharing of things like nude pictures, where you would send somebody intimate pictures of yourself or videos, and which are of a sexual nature, and those are shared without your consent, which is a serious violation of your right to privacy and your right to dignity as well. So this can harm you because it will be on social media platforms, messaging apps, people are actually sharing it. And then the third one would be a consideration of online exploitation, which includes situations where technology is used to exploit individuals, like the one I was talking about, sextortion. So it's not, this has now moved from the non-consensual sharing. It's now moved to be you being forced to do something. For instance, when you send out information, the nude picture, somebody says, pay me, otherwise I'll release it. So that in itself, or online grooming, and those are all areas of tech-facilitated gender-based violence or violence in itself. And when you look at those things, some of us may be facing them, or some of us have been part of that problem, because sometimes we do share this information. So we are part of also the problem when you look at it. So that's what we mean by tech-facilitated violence. Now, on the issue that you're talking about, whether how women can access, or how girls can access, or boys can access access to justice, I think I'll go back to the things that I was saying. when you know your rights,
And my
when
lady, you have 2 minutes on
Yeah.
that one. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, so when you know your rights and where you know the laws, the issue is to know where to report and where to take these matters up when they've happened. So, for instance, if it's happened online on a social media platform like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, you do realize that when you are, there are settings within those spaces that allows you to actually report that violation. So that's a first step. Another step is you can report it to police. And right in this meeting, you will find that there's a police officer who's going to speak. But I also noted in the groups, in the persons that are available, there's Makra. Makra has a space where they call it CERT. CERT deals with these kind of issues that they, that come through in terms of online violence that comes through. So there's also Makra. The third thing you could do, you also have the right to actually sue this person if you know them. You can take them up in a legal suit, and that means you going to a court and saying, I want to for a human rights violation, for a tort, a liability claim is placed against this person, and they can answer. So all these are areas that you could use to actually report and also access justice. And when I mean accessing justice, you can do the case, as I said, you can do it through the police, through CERT, or through yourself. So that means you have a good number of areas to actually bring your case before a court, or if it's not a court you want, but you just want to redress through that thing being taken down, then you look at Makra. But if it's a criminal issue, then you definitely need to report it to police. I don't know if
wonderful.
that covers it.
That is so helpful, and I'm happy that you've actually brought in even the new elements of the laws that are there, because for example, the data protection laws that you've talked about, this is a new area, and not many people in Malawi are very aware of this. And the other cyber law, transaction law, just came out in 2016. But I believe that, these are very important tools, but also very important policy reforms that have just taken place. And we do need to have a lot of awareness. So I'm very happy with your responses, because they also help us to see where survivors can access justice, but also what remedies are available to them. And perhaps this also leads me to introduce our next distinguished panel, Bridget Phiri. I'm pleased to introduce Bridget Oscar Phiri, who is a development a professional with over 5 years of experience in social initiatives, having personally overcome cyberbullying during her university years. She also brings a professional expertise and personal insight to critical issues of online safety and cybersecurity, particularly as they affect young women. And as a social worker, she also creates inclusive and participatory solutions that empower vulnerable populations. So welcome, Bridget. Perhaps maybe what I would like you to reflect on, based on your experience, what are the most crucial support needs for survivors of tech-facilitated violence, in your opinion?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Yes.
All
and
right.
welcome again.
Thank you. Please repeat the question.
Okay, so I'm saying, in your experience.
Yeah.
Okay. In your experience, Bridget, what are the most crucial support needs for survivors of tech-facilitated violence?
Okay, thank you very much, Habiba. I do think that personally, the things that work when it comes to tech related violence are issues of gender responsive solutions. I think solutions must address the specific challenges that women face, considering their intersecting identities, social status, whether disability or not. Also, I think under the same gender responsive solutions, I think policies under the same should focus on eliminating the barriers to justice, because as a survivor of tech related violence, during the time that I was experiencing this, I had a couple of challenges in regards to accessing justice. There were a lot of barriers where a lot of issues were pretty much dwelled on blaming the victim. So I think there's a need for a lot of community engagement, creating community engagement where it's going to act as a key to creating accountability, and organizations as well, local organizations, advocacy groups should be equipped, as well as awareness should be raised on issues of tech facilitated GBV. Yeah.
Oh, great. In your experience, you've said that there were a lot of barriers. And having listened to Justice Ntaba, how can we ensure that legal empowerment tools are truly survivor-centered from your perspective and the challenges that you faced? And perhaps maybe another reflection could be, do you think that feminist approaches play a part in addressing tech-facilitated GBV? And how can we better engage communities in the prevention efforts?
Okay. I think yes, feminist approaches do play a very critical role when it comes to addressing the challenges as well as the barriers to access information. As just mentioned earlier, when we have gender responsive solutions that address these specific challenges to women, it creates a safe space for survivors, and it shifts harmful social practices or norms. I would also say that survivor-centered designed approaches ensure that platforms and policies prioritize the needs, because experiences are different when it comes to take facilitated online abuse, right? To take facilitated violence, issues are very different. We have issues of revenge porn. We have issues of just online harassment. We have issues of blackmailing. So these issues are very different, and they are going to affect people differently. So it is important that the survivor-centered design ensures that these platforms and policies prioritize the needs, the experiences, and also the agency of survivors. So this can include confidential reporting mechanisms, where there's confidential mechanisms where there's privacy. So yeah, you're able to report, but you're also able not to be threatened in the process, or blamed rather. So yeah.
No, thank you very much, Bridget, for these insights. I was very excited when you talked about confidential reporting, because I would say I'm also a victim of cyberbullying. I guess it comes with the territory, and I experienced it firsthand 2 years ago. It was really bad, and I didn't know any way to report. And yet I'm working in the space where I know people can report things, but because it happened to me personally, it was very difficult. So I guess there are also psychosocial issues that must be considered when it comes to reporting, because it becomes problematic when it happens to you. That said, I'm happy now to also introduce another speaker, Gladwel Kubwalo. Please join me in welcoming him. He's our senior superintendent, currently serving as a station officer at Salima Police Station, with over 19 years of experience in criminal investigations. And he has also previously headed the Digital Forensics and Cybercrimes Unit at the National Police Headquarters in Lilongwe. And as a member of the International Association of Scientists and Researchers, his expertise in cybercrime investigation and digital forensics has contributed significantly to local and international online crime prevention efforts. And he is really, I think, from the resume, a very experienced and seasoned expert. Superintendent Kubwalo, welcome. Perhaps let me repeat the question I had for you. What are the most common forms of tech-facilitated gender-based violence issues that you've encountered, and what challenges do law enforcement face in investigating these cases. I think I would like us to really link it up to the period you're in of 16 Days of Activism, and what are the GBV tech issues that you've come across as a superintendent, and also as an expert who's worked within the cybercrime space.
Thank you so much. I think the first thing that I need to highlight is that Malawi Police Service is mandated by the Constitution to carry out some core tasks. And most of the times when people hear the word police, what they think most is that we are going to be arrested, or there is something to do with arrest. But the police is doing a lot, like investigation of crimes, even to prevent, even to protect life and property of individuals. So as a cybercrime specialist, there are a lot of cases which we have received so far during this period, but the major case which have come out is the one which was indicated by Justice Zione Ntaba about sextortion. This is a kind of an online gender-based violence where mostly it is affecting the ladies. The ladies are being enticed to send news or private information to unknown people. As a result, they say, okay, you send me the news and then I'll give you the money. Once the news are sent to the predator, online predator, and then the victims, they don't get the money. Well, as a result, the predators, they say, okay, you give me the money, otherwise I will share these pictures or this news to your relatives or friends, or I'll put them on social media. So I had this system where this happened to one of the high class people. So as a result, she opted to send the money to that person. After a certain period, that predator also told the same person, okay, the money has expired, so you need to send some more monies. So it was like an ongoing thing up to until when that case was brought to our office for further action. So sextortion is one of the big issues on the land. And also we are having currently cyberbullying, where, these days there are a lot of scammers online. They are registering SIM cards using stolen identity, national identity cards. So once they store that national identity card, they go and register a SIM card. They use that SIM card to make sure that they access or they register a fake Facebook account. And then they are using that Facebook account to do the cyberbullying, the cyber harassment. You know what these days these people are doing is that, for example, there was a certain from two girl. She posted her pictures online, and then these scammers, the one who created a fake account, he downloaded those pictures and then posted on a fake account named the Ma Sugar Mummies, and then she was like she's looking for the sugar daddies. And then when the news reached her, she stopped going to school and she wanted to commit suicide. And then when we were trying to track those predators, we found out that they used a stolen ID card. As a result, we got hold of the owner of the ID, but surprisingly, she is a very remote a village woman, and it hasn't ever used it Facebook. So these are some of the issues that we are currently facing in terms of crimes, but the challenges are there. For example, as already indicated by Justice Zione Ntaba, we are having investigators who are not qualified or well trained in the investigation of this online gender-based violence. And also we are having challenges where we are having like people failing to report a crime because they don't know that that is a crime. And even there are some people, they don't want to report that crime because they are shy, or they just want to maintain the integrity that they have. So it is high time now that we need to have online portals where we can report cases. I'm happy this time around that we are having the EmpowerLine app where individuals or victims can access information about online gender-based violence. Even there are also some, I logged in some 2-3 days ago, and I found that even there are some toll-free lines where somebody who has faced a gender-based violence, he can report and then get assisted. Another challenge that we are having is that we need to have strategic and targeted awareness campaigns. We are failing to meet these people and then make them know that what they are being subjected to is a crime. They need to know that this is a crime and this is not a crime. Where to report, when to report, and the assistance that they can get. In terms of the legal framework, the major law that we are having right now is the Electronic Transaction and Cybersecurity Act, which was enacted in 2016. But I'm happy this time around that more laws are being enacted. Our plea or our request could be that if those become laws, if they are enacted, they need to have a stiffer penalties so that people can get deterred from doing such kind of things. On the digital evidence is the same as electronic evidence. This is the evidence that we get from electronic devices like the cell phones that we have. So there are a lot of electronic evidences that we get. For example, the nude pictures. There are some of the examples of the electronic evidence. The messages, for example, I had a certain case where a certain lady was trying to contest for a political position, and then the competitor was a male, and the competitor decided to harass the lady using online platforms, saying that, you know what, this lady is a whore and he cannot do anything. And then there was also another message saying, you know what, this lady cannot withstand the heat in parliament because it doesn't have the knowledge, it doesn't have the intelligence that we need to have when we are presenting issues in parliament. And when that case was reported to us, we tried to find out. Fortunately, we found out that it was just a minor. It was just being sent by someone, the competitor for that matter, that he has to be doing that so that people, when they read those messages about that lady, then she should be discredited or should not be as at par with the male candidate. So these are some of the issues that we encounter. So
thank you,
as a matter of
Gladwel. I just wanted to say that perhaps I may come back to you, but I see. I mean, I had follow-up questions. For example, you know, what is needed to be done, and I think I'm seeing what I'm getting from you is that there's a lot that should be done in terms of legal literacy to help the law enforcement work, particularly with the new laws that are coming out. But also that you've shared with us that these are real and lived cases that you're receiving as a police. But at the same time, I think that it's a double-edged sword that technology should support the police for investigations and prosecution, but you don't have perhaps maybe enough means to do so. So I think I may come back to you looking at our time, invite our next speaker, Jimmy Kainja. Dr. Kainja, Dr. Jimmy Kainja, he's a senior lecturer at the University of Malawi and a leading expert in digital rights, media policy, and surveillance. His decade-long work in media and communication studies, combined with research on the intersection of technology, democracy, and human rights, bring crucial insights to our discussion today on tech-facilitated GBV. And his expertise in digital rights and freedom of expression is also particularly relevant to today's dialogue. So Jimmy, welcome. Allow me to call you Jimmy. I know Jimmy from some time ago. So it's very exciting to have him on this panel. Jimmy, how does media coverage shape public understanding of tech-facilitated GBV, and what role can media play in prevention of tech-related GBV?
Thanks for the introduction, Habiba. I happen to be in a place where we have a lot of doctors, but I'm not a doctor yet. So hopefully one day. But
Take it as a prophecy.
I'm happy to be here and listening to this conversation. I think one thing I think comes very clear, I think as Justice Ntaba said, I think there's a huge gap between the legislations that we have, the mechanisms in place, reporting mechanisms and so on, and the public out there. So the gap is basically if you have victims, for example, Bridget has just spoken, people don't know where to go. And can people trust those institutions in the first place? And I think that's the biggest gap that we have. So when you look at the media coverage don't happen in a vacuum. The people who work as news producers, for example, journalists and whatnot, they are within our communities. They are our sisters, brothers, cousins, and so on. So what they report is really a reflection of what is happening in society. So if I must start from there, you begin then to see that if we don't have these discussions in the society, the chances are they're not going to be highlighted in the media because that's not part of what's being discussed. So I think these are the discussions that we need to start having. And in particular, that when forms of abuse that happens online, it's just mirroring what happens back in society, because we have a lot of issues in our own everyday lives, within the locations where we live. But when this goes online, the difference then is that you're having people to discuss things without their faces on. So people can, hide behind whatever they can hide, and people are having discussions basically beyond just the Chikanda area. For example, we have Chikanda here in Zomba, but now this becomes a global discussion where people can jump in and whatnot. And as you have said, in most cases, victims don't know where to go. They hide, and sometimes even if they know where to go, it's very difficult for people to actually report. When you look at issues of digital rights in Malawi, there are a lot of violations beyond just sharing of nude pictures online and whatnot. But people get picked, people get arrested all the time for saying things basically that almost every one of us say every day in our lives, about people in power, for example. But it's very, very rare that you find issues to do with digital rights abuse. So by digital rights, basically talking about everybody's rights, everybody's freedoms that we exercise offline, but when it comes online, you can call that digital rights. So you find out, for example, somebody questions about let's say just issues, everyday issues to do, whether it's to do with fuel or whether it's to do with major subsidies. People are picked every day. When you look at studies, basically you realize that on average about 13, 20 people get arrested for these things. Most of these issues ends at police level. You get arrested on Friday, Saturday, whatever, you are out on bail and the cases end there. So before the cases get to where Judge Ntaba is, people have been picked up. And in that community, it has a chilling effect. People are scared. If you say something online, for example, about a certain MP, you get picked up. There's an interesting case 2 years ago. A member of public, I remember in Kasungu, I think, called out a member of parliament, questioned about where there's some maize that had been diverted to a different place. And the MP ordered this guy arrested. The police arrest. And why I'm saying this basically is that in most cases, we also need to manage the powers of arrest. Who orders the arrest? Because in most cases, it's powerless people against the most powerful. If you say something against people who should be accountable, trying to hold them to account, you get in trouble. So you have the laws basically that are used to protect the most powerful in society against the powerless. So I'm just to highlight this, that going away diverting away slowly to the discussion about individuals that have been harmed, but people are also being harassed basically for doing things that our laws in Malawi allow. We have freedom of expression. People should be able to associate online and whatnot. So all this comes basically part and parcel of the discussions. Now, talking about the gap between the laws, the regulations, and what takes place in practice, you also realize that in most cases, I think it's a question of language. People who do languages may understand this better. But in 2019, was it after just before COVID? I can't remember now. But there's a study that I participated. We were looking at issues of surveillance and privacy in about 17 African countries. I was researching on Malawi. One thing that came out clearly across African countries is that in most cases, when we take issues, for example, say privacy, surveillance, try and talk about these issues in vernacular, in local language, it loses meaning. So most of the discussions that we are having basically are very, very difficult to have with ordinary people out there, people who can't speak the colonial languages that we all speak. So I think the gap is huge, and the reasons are cultural, the reasons are legal, and sometimes just pure misunderstanding of how we can use all these technologies. But what do we do? Perhaps maybe these conversations are very important, but going beyond these conversations, we need institutions also to make sure that we get to where people are. I see that JGU has actually come up with this app. It's actually brilliant. You can download it on Android, you can download it on your iPhones and whatnot. I mean, I'm in this space, as Habiba was saying, but I didn't realize, there are all these numbers where you can call. There are all these, institutions where you can go and report things. So in other words, the key to what I'm saying, there's a lot of what is happening. Much less is reported in the mainstream media. By mainstream media, I'm talking about you can't hear it on radio, on Zodiac. You don't be in the Nation newspaper, because all these news organizations focuses more on big, grand politics that actually affects us on a daily basis. And if we don't have these discussions, nobody's going to report. If we do more of this, we are going to highlight these issues, and therefore these issues we find out that they are also reported in the media. I think I can
thank
stop
you
there
very
for
much,
now.
Jimmy. Yeah. I was going to stop you there. Of course, I like the fact that I think you've given us a broader picture that this is not just only tech-facilitated GBV. I mean, not to divert and digress from the conversation, but I just wanted, just in a minute, when you were looking at your research findings, like, what forms of tech GBV were coming out very prominently? Because I know you've talked about, just the general online harassment, but did you come across tech facilitated gender-based violence? Like, in your research findings, were there more women who were victims or survivors as compared just to, the general public? I'd be interested just to hear from you. Just a minute.
Yes, unfortunately, yes. Women more or less biggest victims of this. In the first place, women have much, much less access to technologies. And in most cases, I'll give an example. When you look at, I'm using this example because we're going towards elections in Malawi. Women become very big victims when we have something is at stake. So elections, for instance. Misinformation is one thing that we don't talk about. Misinformation, disinformation.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of sharing of intimate nude images online of women. And in most cases, you find out that most of the pictures, most of the images that you find may not be real. Okay, they are doctored. So this is Habiba Osman, and this is what is happening. But how do you, come up and say, no, this is not me and whatnot? It started in Rwanda. There's this lady, Diana Rwangir, trying to contest against Kagame. 2 days later, there were images all over online. But it turns out that these are doctored images. And this is a form of misinformation and disinformation. So in most cases, when it comes to issues that women are trying to contest, for example, in public, that becomes a problem. So among the problems is less women have access to the technologies, The few that have access to technologies, they might not be very comfortable to go and work or benefit from the technologies because of the issues that I'm highlighting. So yes, if you look at it from the gender perspective, I think entirely women are the victims. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, bringing the elections aspect, because indeed we're already in the phase where, we're already seeing, people registering, and also we've seen, violence that is taking place already, and people just posting pictures, and most of the people that are being harmed or attacked or injured women in some of the pictures that we've seen. So I think this conversation is very timely, because also, again, there's the misinformation and disinformation that is just thrown out on social media and other platforms. I would like to go straight to Sarai. Perhaps, Sarai, maybe if you talk about the tool that Gender Justice Unit has pioneered, it will help us also to see how that can really help the law enforcement. But let me introduce Sarai. I'm honored to introduce her as a distinguished human rights lawyer, Sarai Chisala-Tempelhoff, and a gender rights specialist with over 2 decades of experience championing women's access to justice, and also as a founder and director of the Gender Justice Unit. She has also pioneered a lot of research, and specifically on digital gender-based violence, and particularly in the sub-Saharan Africa. Sarai's groundbreaking work on image-based sexual abuse has also shaped policy discussions and legal reforms across the region. And again, we're so proud of Sarai because she's also been recognized among Air Political's 100 most influential people in gender policy in 2021. So she does bring invaluable insights into combating online violence against women. Sarai, perhaps maybe you may be able to share with us, with the time that we're left, how you've introduced EmpowerLine, and explain how it would address the challenges that have been discussed today by our distinguished panelists. More importantly, I think as you delve into your discussion, I would also like you to really reflect on feminist technology development, how it will inform the apps, how it informed the app's design, what impact do you hope to achieve through this innovation, and how will we measure the app's effectiveness? Sorry, I had to give you a lump sum of questions at the same time, but looking at the fact that we've lost on time. But over to you, Sarai, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you so much, Habiba, and thank you to the distinguished panelists who have come before me. I want to start off by thanking all of you for honoring my call to join us, and all of you who are joining from all over the world, it seems, who are here participating in this webinar. It is in fact, it's an incredible day for us as the Gender and Justice Unit. As Habiba mentioned, we are launching EmpowerLine Malawi, so consider this the official launch of that app. And yes, Habiba, you really did lump the questions in for me in one big go. And it's such a shame we don't have enough time, because there are so many threads that have come up from the panelists who came before me that I wish we had time to delve into. I mean, Bridget talked about the issue of victim blaming. And I think a part of it that we didn't touch on enough, but that did come out when you also shared your own experience, is the internal victim blaming that happens so often when it comes to tech-facilitated GBV. Victims of image-based sexual abuse or image-based violence or other forms of online violence often feel like they are somehow to blame for what they're going through and don't feel like they can come forward. I think it was also a shock to hear about the way that this kind of online violence is even spreading out to those who are not able to access technology. So Officer Kubwalo was talking about how one of the victims, in fact, was herself not even in an online space or using online spaces at all. I think this poses more significant challenges for us when we think about what it means to take this information out to the people. How far can we go? And as Jimmy was saying, many times information like this, very technical terms or technical experiences, are hard to translate into the vernacular. And I guess that brings me back full circle to the work of the Gender and Justice Unit. The Gender and Justice Unit, which I established in around 2017, was born out of an idea that the law should not be a barrier to women accessing justice. all of us live within a certain framework, and that framework is social, cultural, but it is also legal. So there are laws that control our lives that oftentimes we aren't even aware of or have no interaction with unless we come into conflict with the law, for example, or if we have other challenges. And in the case of women, these challenges tend to be around civil issues. Civil issues is a technical word, but what it means is things that have to do with our day-to-day lives. For example, maintenance for children, divorce issues, or the death of a parent, a spouse, a family member. These are the times when we come into contact with the law, or gender-based violence as well. And so when the Gender and Justice Unit started, the idea was that we should find a way to translate specifically those critical legal issues, make them accessible, not just the words, the letter of the law, what the law says, but actually how you can then use that law to bring about a shift or a change in your own life. So if the law says that you're entitled to maintenance for your child, even your unborn child, by the way, where do you go? How much do you spend? Who do you speak to access those rights that are in the books about you? And that's what the Gender and Justice Unit tries to do. And we do this through several means. Mainly, we work in terms of legal clinics. We go out and we share information about what the law says and how you can use the law to access justice for the various issues that you're facing, not just gender-based violence. The app is now a new iteration of that, because when we went out, we did research, we asked women what the challenges they were facing are. Women answered. So all of our work is based very much upon what victims themselves share about what they're experiencing, about the gaps that they're facing, the challenges that they have. Women told us, we would be there and say, we're here to talk to you about gender-based violence. And they say, you know what, my son, he's a teenager, he doesn't have anything to do, he's only hanging around. How can you help me with that? So we wanted our responses to be very relevant to the real lived realities of women, and not just urban women such as myself. We created tools that respond very much to issues that rural women came up with. In the course of that work and developing those tools, and those tools are freely available online. So it's a booklet. It tells you about what the law says and where to go. It's also available in the vernacular, because in Malawi, the official language of the law is English. In fact, the official language of the land. But in reality, so few people, as Jimmy said, are actually able to work and experience and understand things very clearly in that colonial language. And so we've worked hard not just to translate and simplify in terms of the technical side, but actually translating the words themselves. So those booklets are available. But I also realized that, Habiba, you and I are actually hardly ever the target of programming like this. When I develop something and when we say we need to go out and speak to the people are perhaps where you are now in the villages, yeah? That's who we think of as the people. And yes, that is urgent, it is critical, it is important, and it is never to be understated and there's never enough of that. But what there also isn't enough of is those of us who are living and working in the online space, experiencing violence in a parallel, as Jimmy pointed out, to the violence that's experienced offline. For those of us who are in these online spaces, not those few, for example, that Officer Kubwalo came across where they're being victimized but may not be aware of it. But those of us who are online and are aware of it, we are hardly ever targeted for interventions. And so we, born of all of our work, of these many years of our work, working with women, with understanding their experiences, understanding their challenges and accessing justice, developed EmpowerLine Malawi. And what EmpowerLine Malawi does is it now targets women and girls, men and boys actually, who are online. It's available to all ages, by providing freely accessible, understandable, and easy to use information on the law, but also the processes. We will share after this with all of you who register. We'll be able to share the slideshow, because I really feel like we don't have enough time to go through it all. But the EmpowerLine app is there, free to download. There's a chat bot that's not only in English. You can speak to the chat bot in the vernacular, ask questions about legal issues that you have. The app itself specifically focuses on gender-related laws, but the information that you ask of the chatbot is also specifically tied into what's available on the app. So you're not going to get, I know that with AI, and we haven't even touched upon what AI really means when we're talking about tech facilitated GBV. I mean, Jimmy brought up a case where somebody, you know, you have deep fakes, you have situations where AI creates an image that has absolutely nothing to do with you. That is going to drastically change the way that gender-based violence is facilitated online, and in dangerous and in scary ways that maybe we can't even prepare for. But we can do right now with what we have is to ensure that the information that is there, the laws that are there, the options that are there are available to people. This app is a way to start raising awareness. It is not only power on your hands, it's power in your hands for those around you who may not be able to access the app. You can ask questions that don't only concern you, but that concern people around you. You can ask, you know, we live and work in communities where we're so integrated. You can ask the security guard, you know, do you have any issues that you've ever wondered about? And ask those questions in the vernacular to the chatbot and be able to not become a lawyer, but at least break down those barriers that language, information, you know, really fancy legal terminology places between us and accessing justice that we all so desperately need. I know that there are so many questions that I haven't even touched on. Habiba, I doubt that I unpacked everything that you brought up. We didn't even delve into the way that online violence is playing out in politics, not enough, but it just tells me that we need to have more and more of these sessions. I'm so encouraged by how many of you attended today, and I can promise you this won't be the last. Our big appreciation and way of observing the 16 days of violence that we are in right now is to provide you, Malawian women, Malawian men, people who need this information, and a way to understand and access information about GBV.
Thank you so much, Sarai. I realize that we do have, I think, a number of questions that I would like to ask as follow-up, but also we do have some Q&A questions from the end. So I think I'll just combine that just to buy the opportunity to our distinguished panelists to share their perspective. But Sarai, this is very interesting because I think the anticlimax of the conversations that we're having is like what means can help women and girls and others who are vulnerable to access justice, but also report. And I'm sure Gladwel is also very excited about this app because this is where we can see, you know, law enforcement working with organizations like Gender Justice Unit to make sure that, you know, there is a comprehensive response to tech facilitated GBV. Perhaps now I'll go to the Q&A and I'll combine it with the questions that will go to some of our panelists so that at least we do not miss out or we do not overlap when it comes to the questions. So we are now opening the floor to our tech issues. Our audience have already given us some questions, so we'll just go straight to the questions and I'll call upon the panelists to respond. There is a question from Lou Joloza. I hope I've pronounced it well, Louis Joloza. And the question is going to Justice Zione Ntaba, who should answer this question. Any of the organizations working in this space lobbying the government for legislative reform, and what barriers and challenges, if any, are you facing? Justice Ntaba, did you hear that question?
Yes, I did. I think at the moment there's not legislative reform that's going on because the laws
Please,
are
can
already
you
being developed. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I was saying that in terms of at the moment, there's no legislative
Yes,
lobbying
we're
that's
hearing
going.
you.
Okay, there's no legislative reform going on because right now the Cybersecurity Act has just been passed. The E-Transactions Act, I think, if I'm not wrong, is being reviewed or was being reviewed. So most of the laws are currently new. So we've yet to test them out so that to start looking at legislative reform. But what will be coming out of those particular legislation is maybe subsidiary legislation, which some of these issues can be addressed. So for the issues about disseminating information, what platforms can be used, what strategies can be used, that might be becoming into what we call subsidiary legislation to the Cybersecurity Act, to the Data Protection Act, or to the E-Transaction Act. Because when you look at the platforms, you're looking at platforms that are actually either in Malawi or not outside Malawi. Or the question is, how do we use our newspapers to ensure that they don't do offensive communication? And that's sorry, I understand my video was not on, my apologies. So maybe that subsidiary legislation and all those things could also help in terms of information sharing, educating the public, and what kind of education needs to go out. Because right now you find that there is some people that are doing what we call online safety, online protections. Others are doing it from a point of view of civil society, but there's not enough coming from for instance, Airtel, TNM, who are the major carriers in the country and who have these major platforms that can be used. And that goes to the question that was asked at the end about what about newspapers who create or put up these offensive pictures that actually put back into, results in bullying, cyberbullying, online harassment. You have to look at the fact that they are not allowed to do that, because under the Communications Act, as well as all these others act, offensive communication is one of the issues that they're not supposed to put out. So if it does reach offensive level, you have a right to either report them to MACRA or even indicate it to the editor that this information that you're putting out, this content that you're putting out, is quite actually very offensive. So I would say that we need the effective platforms that are out there. MACRA has an effective online safety issue that's out there. If you look at EmpowerLine that is just coming out, it will also give you those safety issues. It gives you where to report, how to report. It tells you which laws are being violated. And that is very critical for you to understand. In terms of strategies, as I said, we work together as institutions, you collaborate, you make sure that you know the law, and then you are able to access justice. I don't know if you want me to answer some of our other questions, but I can leave those to the other people as well, because I noticed there's a number of issues that go on. So the rules and regulations are talked about, but I wanted to highlight one final issue, one thing that Zelani talked about in terms of grassroots. I think and let me put it in Chichewa, so let me do it in Chichewa. So
yes,
but it's into Zambia sita bweretsa ndoni akuti sathoyankhulaje usatha kuyuza zinthu zina, kuyuza bwinobwino muna magadgets awo kudziwa kuti akatene tikadina apa tipanga mwakuti. Ndiye pali kufunikira kuti ifedi anthu amene tikudziwa tikupanga zinthuzi tiyike nthawi mpata, tiyikenso ma resources athu kuti tiyesese kuti tisinthe malamulo alowe mchichewa o chitumbuka, tiyike ma applications athuwa mu chichewa o mu language kuti anthu atha kumvetsa, kaya anthu okanika kumva, anthu osaona, kuti tathandiza bwanji kuti ayesese kuti apange zimenezi. Komanso chachikulu nchoti kuti tikapangaso ife program fambi ife download tipapanga program tena tiziyesesa kuti program yetu isangokhala mtown, tiyeniso tipite kumudziko tikauze, tikafotokoze, titauza chalichi, tapempha afuma akapapanga kubwalo tibwere tizayankhule ngati zinthu zimene tukambasi. So ndinene mwachilungamo kuti tiyena tiyesese tizakumbukira kuti izi sizotipanga ife tokha koma aliyese azikunkuza ziko.
Thank you very much, Justice Ntaba. I believe that I think I can summarize what you just said in Chichewa to say that I think what you're urging us as Malawians particularly is that we must be mindful of the fact that we're talking about tech GBV violence in a space where there is also the digital divide, where not many people know how to use these apps. Online apps, but also maybe the online apps are in the hands of the few. But also, I recall that Gladwel, during his presentation, made mention of the fact that there were some people who actually stole some SIM cards from a certain woman who had never used Facebook before. So people can be manipulated, and others can actually take advantage of the fact that they're vulnerable groups that have never used online platforms but they're using their identity to exploit, but also to use their identity facilities for online abuse. So again, another one, we're seeing a situation where I think Gladwel mentioned that a young person strongly is that there's need for digital literacy when it comes to these issues. And you are right, Justice Ntaba, to say that how do we move beyond the online space that perhaps maybe the choir speaking or the choir singing to the converted, but moving beyond that to reaching out to those communities and those people that may not be able to have the information, digital information. And so I think it's coming out very strongly, even from the chat. I see that the questions are like, how do we, which are the effective platforms and strategies for disseminating information. So dissemination is very key when it comes to looking at online gender-based violence and also information that is really affecting the marginalized areas in Malawi. Now, perhaps maybe with the time that we have, I could go back to also, Jimmy, perhaps maybe before I go to the others, just to find out, from the conversations that have just come out, how do we balance freedom of expression with protection from online violence? Let me start off with Jimmy, and perhaps maybe Sarai can also weigh in on that one. How do we balance this animal, the freedom of expression, with protection from online violence? Because we're finding that there's a lot of abuse, apart from the fact that you have mentioned cases where people are being picked. But again, you see that freedom of expression is also being abused. Some people, especially women in public positions like ourselves, I have faced a lot of abuse. We also had the former Director General Martha Chizuma, who also faced a lot of abuse, and people would say that is, they're doing that in exercising their rights and that they can express themselves. So how do we balance that from online violence? Jimmy, and then perhaps Sarai. And I'll give you a minute each if you can attempt to do that. Thank you.
Okay. I think it's a tough one. Because when you look at the regulatory framework in Malawi, I think most things are in place. And if you look at starting around 2016 onwards, where we have mandatory SIM card legislation, when we have national ID. National ID now is used pretty much for everything else. The idea basically was partly to protect people online. But then we realize what Gladwel said is very, very important, that someone can simply steal your national ID and go and register their SIM card. Basically, what that means, it means there's a huge loophole. Who registers our SIM card? It's just another guy under the umbrella. They won't even check. I mean, you can, as I am here, I can use a female's national registration card to register my SIM card, and nobody checks. So where we are having legislations or having regulations, we are also creating other loopholes, and we need to be serious about that. The other issue basically is really just abuse of the law. For example, Judge Ntaba talked about there's in I think e-transaction act there's a provision for or it prohibits offensive communication. But when you look at the question of that provisions, all those provisions have just been used to protect the powerful against the powerless. So it would be the same when you're coming up with something that specifically targets protecting women. We can do that. We can have legislations in place, but we might fall in the same trap. So what we need to do basically, we need to have institutions that actually work. We need to have, need to be realistic that measures that we're putting in place are actually going to be culturally, is it really going to work? Are we sure we are going to be following this? Because when Habiba, you're a legal person, and we've got a lot of legal persons in the room, but you agree with me that there are a lot of provisions, and most of the things that we cry about, the provisions are there, legislations are there, it's just implementation. I think that's where the problem is. So we should not create a situation where we just have legal provisions that are not really applied. And I think that's not practical. So I think we really need to look into this. I think I've exhausted my 1 minute. Thank you.
And Sarai?
You know, this.
Yeah. And Sarai, would you like to weigh in on what
Yeah.
Jimmy has shared?
Yes.
Perhaps a different perspective or just a complementary perspective.
Thanks, Habiba. I was just saying that this is actually one of the areas that I'm very interested in because I tend to find, and I don't know if it's just in Malawi, but definitely in Malawi, when we have an issue or a problem, we immediately respond by saying, well, we need a law for that. We need a policy for that. The reality is we have many, many good laws. We have a body of gender-related laws. And sometimes I say to people that, in fact, we have a Gender Equality Act that criminalizes harmful cultural and social practices. Why don't we just classify online violence as a harmful social practice, which is what it is? Why are the police not using that provision to target? Somebody talked about the newspapers. Wouldn't they also be falling into the category of having gone against a harmful or having perpetrated a harmful social practice? Our problem isn't that we need more laws or better laws. We have good laws. We just don't test them. We aren't using them in the ways that they ought to be used. Like Jimmy was pointing out, these laws often create a loophole. So I don't see it so much as a direct fight between online freedom of expression and freedom from violence.
Yeah.
I think it's very simplistic to fall into that trap to think that, well, you know, these are bad laws, and it would be dangerous to say, well, these are bad laws, let's get rid of them because they're being used in the wrong way. And that's not at all what Jimmy's suggesting. Rather, we need to see these laws being actually used on what they were created for. They were purportedly put in place to protect women, but instead we see them protecting those in power and those who have the means to ensure that prosecution is taking place. And instead, these laws are being used to silence and to chill when it comes to dissent or discussion or criticism of public bodies, spaces, institutions that are open to criticism. Habiba, you talked about how when you experienced violence, you thought about the fact that you are a public official and that made it harder for you to report. And this is very true. But the violence that you experienced was a personal one, and therefore you should still be able to report. That's why EmpowerLine, I think, is really important, because it would share that information with you regardless of who you are. You don't even have to ask somebody, because sometimes even the point of asking about, am I a victim? Do I get to report this? That might already be the barrier between you and seeking some kind of justice.
Yeah.
The other part of it, though, is that our justice systems need to be responsive. It's all well and good for you to know your rights, to know that something has happened to you that is wrong. If you go to the police and they laugh at you, the story ends there. If you go to the police and you say, hey, my nudes were shared. Well, where did your nudes come from? I gave them to my boyfriend. Immediately, the conversation becomes one of victim blaming and inadvertently victim shaming. The idea is that, well, why would you have been so, why would you not have been careful and not share your nudes? So we have the laws. We have the institutions.
I think we have a technical hitch.
What we don't have is the social awareness of what online violence is. And where it is there, where we do have that awareness, the fact that people are allowed to engage in these kinds of behaviors and there's no response to them emboldens them. And that's not a Malawian problem. That's a global problem. We see these cases, just as Ntaba started her presentation by sharing about Demi Lovato and Demi Lovato's experience of online violence. And there are many celebrities who have experienced online violence. So it's not a small issue. It happens in the backdrop and the context of a lack of gender equality in a time when globally there is a rollback of women's rights and there's higher and higher levels of online violence against women. This is being used in some ways that are very obvious, in some other ways that are quite insidious, to reinstate a lack of gender equality, to strengthen a lack of gender equality. For my sisters who are online, I think maybe you've been seeing on TikTok and so on, these trends about the trad wife. The trad wife, while it seems very cute, in reality, if you dig deeper into what that whole movement motion is, it ties into a deeper push back against women's empowerment, women coming forward, women being strong, women speaking out for themselves.
Yeah.
Online violence really serves to do that even more, because when you experience violence online, you go offline. When you go offline, your important voice is silenced. So
Yeah.
let me hand back to you, Habiba, and the other panelists. There's still so much to share on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarai. And perhaps maybe time is not on our side, but I may want to bring in Bridget because she brought in the survivor element perspective. I mean, Bridget, if you're still online, I know we've had a lot of conversations around, the challenges in people reporting. But what would be your key takeaway, like in terms of ensuring that legal empowerment tools reach the most vulnerable? And I hope you can attempt that in 1 minute, because I see that I have only 8 minutes before we wrap up. What from the conversations that have happened today, and also the amazing questions that I've put in our chat box from different people, Louisa and others, Bridget, they've come out to ask questions. But from what you've seen and what you've heard, and from your past experience, what do you think should be done in terms of reaching out to vulnerable populations?
I think what happens with take facilitated GBV in most cases is it usually leaves out behind the ones that are in the most vulnerable position, especially those in the marginalized communities. So I think for me is there should be a lot of awareness. We can use radios because those are like the channels that most people in the rural areas use at grassroots level. We can also use mobile messaging. I think that's quite common. We demand a message from Maneb and stuff like that. We do ignore them, but at least when we see them, we actually get the message. So I think something like that, and especially also because right now the internet usage in Malawi is about 5 million only for users. So you can already see a population of 20 million, only 5 million are able to access the internet. Then there's a lot of awareness needed to be done at grassroots level. So I think even just GJU bringing in the Empower line is going to make a huge difference. For instance, for me, during the time that I was experiencing tech facilitated GBV, there was no such an app, but I think, and I wasn't able to get justice. But if something like this was there, then in 2020, I'm sure it was going to make everything a whole lot easier. Yeah. So otherwise, I think the app is really good. I really like it. I've gone through it. I think everyone should go through it. I only have one recommendation. Maybe they should.
Yeah, please, you have half a minute there. What's the recommendation?
I think they should add a survivor. I don't know, a section where their stories shared and stories shared that actually went to court or justice was actually served, so that it should motivate people to report and see that justice is actually being served. So if they could incorporate that section, yeah. Otherwise,
fantastic.
It's good. Yeah.
Great.
You.
Good to hear that. And I'm sure Sarai and the technicians have heard that. I think it's a very important way to also encourage people to report more of these cases. And maybe I'll finish off with Gladwel, because I think I gave an opportunity to the others. Gladwel, what would be something that you would want to share in terms of making sure that perhaps maybe the law enforcement is amplifying the messages around, because I believe that the police itself, it's a colossal institution. You are everywhere. The police are you go everywhere. There's a police station. You go in every district, there's a police officer, you have roadblocks, etc. It's a colossal institution. And so what do you think should be done in terms of, the considerations of ensuring that sectors are playing a critical role, particularly a comprehensive response to tech-facilitated GBV from the police perspective? Just 1 minute, because I know we have to wrap up in 4 minutes.
Let me in the first place concur with Madam Sarai that there are some police officers who molest the victims of online gender-based violence, which needs a need for us to train enough investigators or the police officers to be trained on how they can handle victims or cases to do with online gender-based violence. Also, of the view that we need to have collaborative, strategic, and comprehensive awareness campaigns, because we had a case that was in Salima where a 69-odd man was having canon knowledge with a 7-year-old girl and an 11-year-old girl, and then the lady in the house was aware of that. When she was quizzed, she said, you know what, we are just preparing these ladies for the future roles of when they will be married. So we need to sensitize these people or such a lady, because that's so bad. That's a very, very negative approach towards these issues. So that's in simple. That's the best that I can end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gladwel, for ending it on that note. And I'm sure some of our audience members, especially those living in Malawi, have noted that the police are doing some things, and that they can have access to the police when it comes to issues of tech GBV that is popular now, but also just the online abuse that takes place. We have come to the end of our session today. And as we conclude our discussion, I'd just like to reflect on a few takeaways. From the conversation, I'm seeing that there's need for us to create a critical, collaborative approach for all the issues that we've talked about. And Sarai was very right to say that this conversation alone is not enough. We've just touched the tip of the iceberg. So it's very important that there's a critical need for collaborative approaches across the board, from law enforcement, the courts, civil society, the media, and also just those working even in the governance space who address these issues, like the Malawi Human Rights Commission, for example. And then there's also the need for important approaches when it comes to survivor-centered solutions. Bridget, you've been fantastic in giving us, like, for example, the example of saying, we need a survivor-centered solution that don't only reach out to those who can access technology, but even those that are left behind. And I think in the spirit of leaving no one behind, we must really also look at survivor-centered solutions that can also be able to bring out their stories, as well as the best practices, so to speak. And again, I think the other important aspect that I've picked from the conversation is the potential for technology to enhance access to justice, which is very, very critical. And I think looking at the conversations that are taking place right now in Malawi, the issues about access to justice and how that has been challenging for most people. So we're already seeing the demand, but now we also need to look at the supply side, how that is being affected. And so for me, I believe, and with the others in joining Sarai and Gender Justice Unit, to congratulate them, to say that the launch of the EmpowerLine app represents a significant step forward in our collective fight against tech-facilitated GBV. So this is very key, it's very important, and we've taken all the submissions in the chat boxes, but also even from our presenters who've given us also some insights to reflect on and to also improve the app. The good thing is an app, so it can be improved, because as it is, that's the beauty about technology. It's always advancing and always innovating. And so I want to thank each one of you who attended this panel. Particularly, I also want to thank our distinguished panelists. I also want to thank Upile for bringing in really the element of poetry, because that's also one way of healing, but also telling our story. So I want to thank you for engaging with our audience and for being part of this crucial dialogue that has taken place today as we commemorate 16 days of gender-based violence. And also as we really try to look at other forms of violence that are affecting women, girls, men, and boys, but perhaps is not being given the spotlight that is required. So thank you so much. And I do hope that you can also download more information on the EmpowerLine app. Please visit Gender Justice Unit website and the app stores. You will find the EmpowerLine app. And again, just to also remind some of our stakeholders who joined, YFN, women councillors, women parliamentarians, JGU feminist alumni, that there is a code that you should use for your needs, the EVTF 2024. I'll repeat that, EVTF 2024 code for the needs that are specific to your joining the conversation today. Thank you so much for your participation, and I'm wishing you all the best. Thank you.